My friends, what lays before you is the myriad knowledge of an unfathomable universe. Join our intrepid remembrancers as they explore the heresy as history. From deep within the farthest reaches of the great library of Tiska, we are the Heresy Grad School. So said the War Master in his wisdom. Go forth, my sons, and illuminate them.
So here's my theory on Alpharius and the Alpha Legion, right? Mm-hmm. And I just thought about this. I think he cloned himself. I actually think we have evidence that he cloned himself, because at the very end of, was it Praetorian of Dorn or was it Solar War, he basically says that he's like, he's disembodied, right? Like he put his consciousness into some other form. Like he's like, if this goes sideways, man, he's like, this is not the end of me. Do you remember that, Jason?
Yeah, didn't we have this conversation? Because I said that sounded almost exactly like what the Dark Eldar do with the homunculus covens.
Ooh, maybe.
So Dark Eldar Archons will give the homunculi are the only ones in Dark Eldar society that know how to keep to transfer consciousness. So a Dark Eldar Lord will pay like an incredible amount of Dark Eldar dollars, rubles, I guess, to like the homunculus covens to keep a teeny portion, some blood, a hair clipping, a finger, something like that.
Yeah.
And so if they die, they'll immediately be their consciousness will be kicked over into their next waiting body.
Well, we know that Alpharius was deep in the Cabal, right? He was recruited by the Cabal. So all of that knowledge, that the fact that they were able to resurrect, folks, Damian Pretantus and the other quote unquote perpetuals, but really maybe not, because the Cabal was really just sort of reincarnating them.
Oh, that reminds me. Have you gotten through Old Earth yet?
No, I really need to get through that.
Okay, I won't spoil it for you, but there's a whole bunch of hilarity with the Cabal, and it's like they're trying to tie that whole sort of deal. It's really good.
Yeah.
You definitely won't be mad at it if you read it. But but it's interesting because it's like, on one half there's a Vulcan who's a perpetual, and then on the other half there's a Cabal, which Eldrad, is kind of diametrically opposed to them now.
Right.
So he's trying to take out Cabal members permanently. It's pretty good.
Ooh, I didn't know that was cool. That's kind of cool. It's like a little mafia war.
Exactly. And I love, I have no idea why they gave him that ridiculous accent, but I love Damon Praetanus. When John Grammaticus dies for the last time, and he's like, "This is it, Johnny. This is your one last chance."
Johnny boy. Yeah, it's like a 1940s maybe New York accent. Yeah, they're all gangsters. Yeah. But they're all from that, right? Time period. Yeah.
It's what do you mean there's no Brooklyn in space?
Which is the greatest thing is, I don't know who does. It's either Jonathan Keeble or who's the other? Gareth Armstrong, right? They're just fantastic voice actors, and it's do the 1940s Brooklyn, New York accent, nails it.
It's pretty spectacular.
To Butcher's
of course.
Story?
That one's terrific. It's the first time Lotara Saren is in a short story.
Ooh, yeah.
And she fucking nails a bunch of Eldar ships.
Yeah, because Angron basically tells her, we gotta track these things down. They're annoying me. And she's like, "Sir, none of our ships have ever been able to find them, much less track them down." He's like, "I don't care. Do it anyway."
Right?
And she does.
But I think it's all foreboding for Angron's trans.
I do really like Butcher's Nails too, just because it just is such a fun, if that was a TV show, it would be one of those fun one-off episodes. Because Angron's basically well, Lorgar, instead of just, opposing me at everything and, just being the solid, straight and narrow, let's get stuff done guy all the time. Let's just, like, did you ever consider coming with me and screwing around for a day? And Lord Gar's like, all right, fuck it, let's do it. And then they go on a weekend.
It's when you get to the Lost and the Damned, which is the second book in the Solar Wars, right, the Seed of Terra. There's a very powerful scene with Latara Sarin and Karn, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody because it's really good, but it's because they both know that they've sort of crossed this line, right? There's no coming back from this, right? And they know, and they sort of know where they are, and it's just, at this point, I think it's just damage control, man. And it's really powerful from the point of view of, like, Latara Sarin and, Karn are the only really competent, conscious ones left within the the World Eaters, like on the Conqueror. Like, it's just, and it's all damage control at this point, right? And it's just, they're strung out, and it's so good. And I love that they're still in the story, and they're still in the story, and even when the Lost and the Damned ends, they're still in the story. So it's good.
I am really interested to see because we know Karn's still around even up till M42.
Oh,
but
yeah.
At some point, Latara Sarin dies because she's not in Karn Eater of Worlds, which is immediately following the Siege of Terra into the Scouring.
Interesting. Who wrote that, Jason? Who was the author on that?
I want to say Anthony Reynolds, but don't quote me on it.
Please hold.
Okay.
But
yeah, Anthony Reynolds. By the way, listeners, welcome back to Heresy Grad School. We're just kind of having a book chat.
And Pat's getting us back on track like the stellar manager he is.
Well, no. I think it's reasonable that we talk about books. I mean, that's kind of our jobs as the historians of the podcast. We keep track of this random collection of knowledge that this game and we all love.
And it is always nice, too, when we can pull a bunch of stuff from the Black Library books into the stuff with the giant black books, because they really kind of cross-pollinate a whole bunch, and it's really terrific to see it from different angles.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. But before we get into... Listeners, we're going back into Paramar again. If you're following along, we're in the third black book on page 22. But what I want to talk to Jason... In Karn Eater of Worlds, like the intro, so is the Conqueror destroyed?
It's not. The Conqueror's still around in M4142.
Okay.
It's the story of Karn is still basically in a coma after the Siege of Terra, and it's the largest part of what's left of the World Eaters as a legion, as they're trying to figure out, like, what's going on. It's like, where do we go from here? Horus was killed. Everybody's been kind of scattered. It's like, what are we doing? Do we try to stay together as a legion? Do we break up, like, and go our separate ways like the Night Lords did? Like, what do we hang on to? And it's why I think it's the captain of the 9th Assault Company who's hanging on to most everything. And what's interesting, too, is not only do you see some characters, like, from the World Eaters from the Heresy, but you also see some from farther on into some of the smaller works. Like, if you guys have ever listened to Eightfold Path, it's a teeny little audio drama. I think it was one of the first ones Black Library ever did, but that's also Anthony Reynolds. And it has a couple of teeny character cameos from that as well. But it's pretty great. It's actually how the World Eaters go about during the Scouring and into the Legion Wars, and how they actually first start their beef with the Emperor's Children.
Because then, during the Legion Wars, the Emperor's Children eradicate everything that's left of the Sons of Horus.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also interesting because I think Karn is almost, like, diametrically opposed to Abaddon, right? Like, Abaddon's trying to pull everybody together. He's saying, forget your old pacts and differences. Like, I mean, like, stay true to the ideal, right? They were made for more than just sort of the emperor's false truth, right? And so, but Karn, I think, and I don't know, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, eventually he just becomes so jaded that he just kind of goes off on his own. Right? He doesn't have his war band, he doesn't have followers, right? He just sort of, I mean, he just sort of becomes this machine, right? This like force of nature, and he really,
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
pretty accurate way to describe it. When he does wake back up, because that's definitely not a spoiler, because you know he wakes up at some point, but when he wakes back up in Eater of Worlds, a whole he's like this figurehead for them now, since Angron's like nobody knows where Angron is. But he's like this figurehead, and everybody wants him for something different. Like some of the captains want him to, try and pull the World Eaters back together again, and some of them want him to try and, lash out and attack the Loyalists again. And he just, once he wakes back up, he essentially, I mean, he even tells the captain of the Ninth Company, he's like, I don't want this. I thought I was dead. I don't want to be back and have all of these problems again.
man, that's heavy, dude.
I mean, it's a
Yeah,
spectacular novel.
I'm gonna have to check. All right, Pat. So let's get into, or let be back into Paramar, right? I mean, we could do this all night. I feel like.
Yeah,
Easily.
we could spend the night just talking about this shit. So, but yeah, no, let's get back into it, fellas. Jason, I think we're starting around Iron Pilgrims, right?
Yep, that's page 22 on, let's see, book 3. If you're checking that business out with us, down near the bottom left there, Iron Pilgrim. So, last time on the Paramar engagement, the Alpha Legion have, set up shop and have been slowly kind of constricting the Paramar system, unbeknownst to the, I don't know, what would you call them, Paramarians?
Yeah,
I mean, close enough, right? But so they've been inserting agents, hijacking supply ships, all sorts of Alpha Legion brand nefariousness going on. So they have initiated their plan. The noose is tightening. Everything's coming together. It is kicked off, and the second they have started to push two major offensives. One at the Paramar Nexus around Paramar 5, and the ship we talked about last time, the Annex Row. And on the other side, we have the Pharion, which is the big giant Quirion navigational beacon, is being moved on by the Sigma Pythonus and its little bunch of escorts. They are pretty much clueless, the Paramarians are clueless as to the entirety of what's going on at the drop site still. So to see a bunch of Alpha Legion ships showing up, demanding to dock for resupply and whatnot, is not that big of a deal. Now, the problem for the Alpha Legion is they have all of this planned down to like the most minute detail, which we'll get into a little bit later, except for the 5 Iron Warrior ships that drop into the system, led off by the Tyche's Lament, which is the flagship of Kier Valen and the 77th Grand Battalion of the Iron Warriors. So, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. It was kind of interesting. I looked this up just because I love some of the, fun little historical and mythological allusions they put in here. Tyche, or the Roman equivalent is Fortuna, are the Greek and Roman goddesses, respectively, of luck and the prosperity of cities. So Tyche's Lament is pretty entertaining as a ship name for an Iron Warrior who are particularly, jaded and no nonsense. So, these Iron Warrior ships coming in, kind of a pain in the ass for the Alpha Legion. They've just set this entire plan they've spent all this time and effort, putting together, and this is a variable they did not account for, because several things could be true. Did the War Master not trust them enough to get this done and sent along an Iron Warriors fleet, mini-fleet, as sort of a watchdog? Are they there to aid the Alpha Legion? are these all of the ships that the Iron Warriors have, or is this just a small, fleet delegation? They don't know, but at this point they're too far into this plan to, put a halt on any of it. So the Sigma Pythonus, things go a little better here for the Alpha Legion. They dock at some of the outermost shipyards, and a single Thunderhawk jets off to the Ferion station. When it gets there, it's only a single figure descending from the ramp to this great delegation of deck officers and the attending Majos. Alfarius, because of course he is, demands to be taken to the Master of the Ferion. And this is pretty entertaining as a plan, which is really simplistic, but it works really well for them. Nobody on that station wants to risk, insulting a Primarch by showing up. So every single high-ranking officer, the Commandant Intendant, the Majo Shipmaster of the entire Anchorage fleet, the Preceptor of Astropaths, anybody that helps run the Ferion shows up to meet with Alfarius, who, as soon as they start to figure something out, the first alarm klaxons start going off, Alfarius murders every single one of them. And now the entirety of the upper echelons of the command structure of the Ferion are completely absent. And as the Sigma Pythonus now opens fire at more or less dead zero range and cripples a lot of the close-range station defenses, a bunch of their void shield generators, punches through a whole bunch of vital systems, and launches in a ton of boarding craft and teleport attacks. The other docked ships of the Alpha Legion start disgorging Castuses, Dreadclaws, all sorts of nasty things. Systems are kind of dying left and right here at the Ferion, and the only defenses that are still operational are being fed conflicting targeting data, so they're firing into the empty void, they're firing at themselves, they're firing at friendly ships, all over the place. And now, as things are slowly filtering down to the deck officers and, the ship provosts and even down into the menial crew, they're finding that their officers have been poisoned, uh, work gang masters and deck officers have been murdered or just straight up missing. It's an absolute shit show, and nobody knows what's going on. So basically, the perfect Alpha Legion takeover. The Ferion is overtaken, and any tiny token resistance are crushed in less than an hour. And this is particularly bad for the huge cordon of outer defense batteries that the Sigma Pythonus just flew through, because they can't retaliate, as they were designed to protect from outside assaults, and can't be trained on interior bastions like the Ferion. I mean, why would they ever have to, right? So, in the other direction, over Paramar 5, things aren't going as well. Now, Taiki's Lament and the Annex Row are essentially kind of vying in position in geosynchronous orbit over the Paramar Nexus, and they're both demanding the first right for docking and to send in a delegation. Now, the Mechanicum, as always, remain neutral. Tell my wife I said hello. But it slowly dawns on the Alpha Legion that the 77th has no clue of the Drop Site Massacre, or even that their Primarch is kind of sided with the War Master. So, what's gone on here is completely, outside the range of anything else. The 77th has been under independent operation for more than 4 decades, so more than 40 years by themselves on a single suppression campaign of the Therican Wastes, which is this little range of space that they've garrisoned against numerous xenospecies that keep wanting to move in and, push their shit in. So Kirvalen, completely gormless, was just turning for a scheduled, resupply run, as he'd done time and time and time again over the length and breadth of this suppression campaign. And he had no idea what was going on, that the Alpha Legion was essentially there to destroy, part of the station in a system he was supposed to protect. He was just angry he couldn't come back and immediately get his shopping done. Which, seems like the most Iron Warrior thing ever.
Hey,
Hey,
Jason,
okay.
let me. Yeah, oh yeah, Pat. Yeah, so let me just jump in right here because I think this passage, right, impasse on page 23,
Hmm.
speaks to so much of who the Iron Warriors are, right? So this is not the first time that the 77th Grand Battalion has been to Paramar for resupply, right? They've been many times before, but yet they've been essentially out of the net for 4 decades. So, like, how many times have they come back for resupply, right? Like three, four? I mean, that's 120 years. That's the entire length of the Great Crusade, at least in sort of my back of the envelope math, right? So, I mean, that just speaks to the Iron Warriors, right? I mean, this is their lot in life. They're left on the cold, dark edge of the galaxy to bleed out, unremembered, unknown, probably saving humanity from who knows what. And we'll never know because the Theracon wastes are sort of like Jason. What did we talk about when we were talking about the Night Lords? Right, there was like that one passage. It was
Oh, right.
like Gomortha or
Get some
something.
more.
Yeah, guess some more, right? We'll never know what that is, right?
As
Well,
cool as that sounds,
yeah,
still have no idea what those are. That's very frustrating.
yeah, and so we'll probably never know what the Theracon wastes are, but it's where the Iron Warriors of the 77th Grand Battalion have been bleeding out for 40 years, and they just happen to show up at this critical time, and yeah, it's awesome how they sort of weave these events together. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because it does really. I mean, for the Mechanicum to be like, oh yeah, they showed up, and then these guys showed up, and we're gonna try to play neutrality. It's like, wow,
It's like,
wow,
let them figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, okay. Well, so listeners, here's your super difficult homework for this week. Figure out anything about the Theracon waste other than the brief mention on page 23 in the third black.
That would be
Also,
interesting.
Jason, I feel like you aren't counting in space scurvy as a reason for the Iron Warriors to really want to get to Dock.
There's very little vitamin C in space.
This is true.
So,
But I was also thinking, you mentioned the name of their ship being essentially the. You mentioned the luck of the city, kind of.
hmm
But it makes sense as Iron Warriors because they're technically no
right.
the Siege Breakers, that being anti-luck of a city.
Yeah, Taiki's Lament. Bad
Yeah.
luck for whatever city they're rolling on. Alright, guys. Let's talk about what's going on the Annex Row. So, kind of trying to see this from the Alpha Legion's perspective. Um, they have two options here. They can pull out of this operation that they have just initiated that has taken them God knows how long, months of prep and planning, and just hundreds and thousands of Astartes and operatives and everything that has been pulled into place only to be staved off at the last second by the Iron Warriors, or they can just forge ahead, hope this doesn't screw them too hard, and try to get stuff done anyway. So this is what they go with. The captain of the Annex Row is kind of having trouble here because Auspex returns on the long range scans are starting to show returns of heavy weapons fire at the Pharion. So this kind of forces his hand, and they choose to respond to this by launching a full spread of fusion torpedoes near point blank at the Taiki's Lament and turning towards the Nexus to launch Charybdis assault boats at the primary terminal. So the Mechanicum adepts here react as well as they could, which is pretty fast, and if it was, humans assaulting them, it might have gone a little differently, but the drop pods launched from the Annex Row managed to make it through the shields just before they can form. They're actually tearing through, the little vestigial void shields just coming to life, targeting the Terminus Panopticon. So the Annex Row splits its attention between firing off lance strikes from its dorsal lances into the Iron Warrior escorts to scatter them, and turning its main bombardment cannon towards groundward targets in an attempt, well, groundward in the fact that they're still voidborn, but pointed towards the ground. The macro bombardment cannon attempts to overload the shield, and the torpedoes are desperately reloading, and so they're trying to overwhelm the terminus by force now, since subtlety is no longer an option. Now, here's the thing. They launched a full spread of fusion torpedoes straight at the Taiki's Lament, striking it essentially dead in the face for the ship. And it's not the best idea considering, because Iron Warrior ships have meters of ablative void plating, and let's see here. Meter upon meter of ablative armor plating added to the hulking warship by her bitter-hearted master had been splashed into jetting plasma by the fusion torpedo strikes, but the armored core beneath it, fashioned in the forges of the Olympia shipyards, had been built to withstand worse, and that had barely been scorched. They didn't even make it through the ablative armored plating. They just pissed it off. And what I think is terrific is the very next paragraph. Extant records show that though his ship's targeting auspexes had been blinded, and the bridge flamed about him, it was Warsmith Caervalen himself who threw aside his steersman and triggered the main drives at maximum burn, shouting black profane oaths aloud as the 7-kilometer-long warship hurtled like a burning spear at the Annex Row. So, his bridge is on fire, every targeting auspex is blind, and Caervalen's first thought is to hurl his entire, not to shoot at it, to hurl his entire flagship at the Annex Row that just launched fusion torpedoes at him. That is the most Iron Warrior thing possibly to ever exist.
And I mean, it's also pretty badass.
It is pretty badass. So, the on fire Taiki's Lament strikes the Annex Row amidships, and even though it tries to evade, they're kind of trying to do too many things at once at this point. So the Lament strikes it from directly below, breaks its void shields open, and beats it aside in a storm of broken debris and venting atmosphere. So the Annex Row is heavily built, and it's not completely destroyed, but its own engines were just kicking on as the Lament struck it, so the engine thrust that's already building up through it kind of throws it sort of screwy out of orbit, and they're desperately trying to bring themselves to bear as the Taiki's Lament is even now lining up another attack run.
I totally see it. No big deal.
It would be pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it's so good, man. I mean, I talked a little bit last episode about really the imperative for the 20th Legion to get the assault cruiser down on the ground, right? Like they had to land the Annex Row. That was the decapitation strike, and this is not just a typical assault cruiser, right? Like this has got this packs of bombardment cannon. It's got, I mean, ablative armor. It survives a strike from a capital ship. I mean, we have some anecdotal evidence to suggest how big this thing is, but it's denied, right? And it's just Caervalen is that much more of a badass for throwing his capital ship into the middle of this. Yeah, it's so good, very cool. I mean, this is almost like as cinematic and thematic as you can get. It echoes, I think, in a lot of ways the battle for Port Ma, right? Almost really an analog, because you're trying to take out the command and control center, right? That's what Horus is always trying to do. Horus always tries to take out the command and control of whatever enemy he's targeting. And so the Panopticon just like at the Panopticon and the Coordinate Deeps at Port Ma, that was his target, and he did so through subversion and stealth, as well as orchestrated plan. He's trying to do that, or the Alpha Legion's trying to do that again here. So I think there's a lot of really cool analogs, but yeah, man, this is good. I don't think I have a lot more to add to this narrative, like at this point, right? Like I think we've sort of taken it up to the climax of trying to land the Annex Row, right? Like this really was the Alpha Legion's primary objective, which was to land the Annex Row, this heavy assault cruiser, which would have decapitated Paramar. But they couldn't do it, and just they couldn't bring their bombardment cannon online. And Keir Valen is just such a fucking badass that he denied them more than one bombardment. Right, the fusion missiles, and the initial sort of surprise attack on the Tyche's Lament, and he just he drove them off, man. And then he fucking lands. Right? And then he lands, and that's where we're going, guys, because this is not over. It's not even close to over. So, yeah. So, I mean, you probably figured it out by now, but, the Iron Warriors are able to land their fleet, and then sort of the defense starts, right? Because we know there's an entire 20th Legion fleet hiding behind the sort of solar radiation auspex, dispersion. So they're going to come in next. I don't know. I mean, I think that's where we're going, right, Jason?
It is indeed. All that and more next time on Heresy Grad School.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess, fellas, I guess that's the end of the episode. Do we have any plugs? Dave, you got anybody?
I was gonna plug a few people. I was gonna say thanks to Alex, right? Alex is a longtime Patreon supporter. He may have been our first. Alex, your stuff is in the mail, man, but it may be a while. It's got to go through a couple mandible points and warp translations. So
the warp is mighty thin down there, from what I've been told. I heard you guys already have Tyranids, Alex. Goodness gracious. But yeah, no. Shout out to all of our subscribers. There's still a poll up right now for a Heresy Grad School listener chosen episode. And I was just talking with Jesse over on the main cast. It's going to be up till the end of the week. So if you've ever thought about choosing what topic we cover, now's your chance. I think it's the Praetorian. It's either the Praetor or the Centurion level gets you access to that poll. And the options are, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, Xana, the Silent Sisterhood, and
yeah, and I will say that I think right now we're leaning towards sort of exploring the Silent Sisters and sort of their Divisio Astrotelepathica connection, right? And so that'll be pretty cool. I think that's sort of where the voting is going. But, Pat and Jesse are they're the masters of our destiny. So yeah, I don't know how long this is going to stay open. But if you guys want to get in, I think it's going to be open for a little bit longer. And yeah, you can vote on where we are going next. I will say, if we go to Xana, that will be a very long, multi-part Heresy Grad School, right? That'll be on the order of sort of the Coordinate Deeps. I like Jason and I have been kicking back, and Pat too. We've been kicking back ideas on Xana for a long time, and we're gonna get there. I'm not sure when we're gonna get there, but it'll be a very, very deep dive.
It is going to be an undertaking.
Yeah, it'll be definitely an undertaking. So guys, let us know what you want.
Or choose Karn. Karn's cool. Just putting that out there.
Karn is pretty cool. I think that's why I had that Eater of Worlds novella on my mind.
I'm just saying, if listeners love Pat, vote for Karn. Again, just a shout out to everybody who signed Patreon. Thank you guys so much. You're helping this cast run. So thank you very much. And I mean, hell, all of the listeners are helping this cast run. You guys give us the motivation to, hang out for a couple evenings a week, some recording and editing. And Jason, you got anybody or anything?
Not that I can think of. I'm pretty content.
Not Coke or Pepsi or
Ugh.
boba tea or something like that.
I am a fan of a good bubble tea.
All bubble tea manufacturers, we're looking for a sponsor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm tired of waiting around for Coca-Cola.
They missed their chance. Well, hope you all have enjoyed. School is kind of a short one, but talk to you all next time. Bye.